Taoiseach, everyone in this House agrees that sexual and gender-based violence is an epidemic. No part of society or sector is immune, and we all know that tackling it and eradicating it isn't easy. But sometimes it seems like the state isn't even trying. Take, for instance, what's happening in the Defence Forces. We know that 68 members of the Defence Forces have either been convicted of crimes or are before the courts charged with criminal offences. It is bizarre that we need to appoint a senior counsel to tell us that Defence Forces personnel who are convicted of serious crimes like sexual offences should not be serving. But that is apparently what the government is proposing to do. That's not an approach that screams zero tolerance. But the reality is we don't see much in the way of zero tolerance outside of it just being a slogan. It's hard to find evidence of a zero tolerance approach anywhere. We learned this week that a Dublin taxi driver, Raymond Shorten, convicted of raping 2 young women, had previous convictions for sexual offences. One of his victims said she thought she would be safe when she hailed a taxi. That's what we're told is the safe option. The reality was she had gotten into a vehicle being driven by a serial predator. Why did he have a taxi licence? Why didn't the regulator act? How many other taxi drivers have similar convictions? Do we even know? At least the regulator, the National Transport Authority, actually has powers to disqualify taxi drivers convicted of serious crimes. The question is the NTA using them, or do those powers need to be enhanced? This isn't the case in other professions. The Dental Council of Ireland has been begging successive governments for years to give it powers to take action against rogue dentists, but nothing has been done. We know at least one dentist convicted of sexual assault was able to practice in Ireland because the regulator had no power to stop them. Those powers still do not exist, and those powers can only be given to the Dental Council by the government. Taoiseach, counselling services are also a wild west when it comes to regulation. The reality is there is none. Vulnerable sexual abuse victims will often seek counselling support. They're exposed to unnecessary additional risk because of the complete absence of any regulation. Taoiseach, you said last week that any member of the Defence Forces charged with sexual assault or rape would be put on immediate leave. Did that happen? How many Defence Force members were suspended? Do you also believe taxi drivers, dentists, counsellors and members of other professions who have close contact with members of the public should be similarly suspended when facing serious sexual offences? And if so, are you going to do anything about it? Has anyone in government written to the NTA about Raymond Shorten case? Do you know why that predator had a taxi licence? When will the government do more than talk about zero tolerance and give professional bodies like the Defence Forces, the Dental Council and others the power that they actually need to make zero tolerance a reality?
Thank you, Deputy. First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this issue. The government did publish in 2022 a 5-year zero tolerance strategy and have established CUAN, the agency which we had agreed with all involved in the sector to deliver on this ambition. And it has an overall budget of about 59 million for 2024. And I want to pay tribute again to Natasha O'Brien, but also to Bláthnaid Raleigh and others who have come forward to tell their story. Because more and more, in my view, in the criminal justice system, the focus has to switch more to the victim's journey. Now, the O'Malley report did identify significant improvements that could happen in respect of the victim's journey through the entire criminal justice system. In Bláthnaid Raleigh's case, I think you're talking about 5 years of that person's life suspended, in essence, before justice could be served. That's too long, in my view. So I think there are very serious issues there in terms of that entire system, in terms of alleviating and reducing trauma and ensuring that the trauma is not prolonged. And it's not just all talk. I mean, people on all sides of the house have families, Some are married, some are not. Some of us find it incomprehensible that men can visit such violence upon women. And the nature of the attacks we've witnessed are absolutely appalling. And we've discussed this in terms of what's happening with our younger population, in terms of their access to online, to a whole range of materials, which could either be brutalizing attitudes or creating new attitudes. These are very fundamental issues that society collectively has to work on. And government has the major responsibility, I accept that, in dealing with this issue, but it is multifaceted. You referenced the Defence Forces. The 68 cases, they're not all relating to gender-based violence. There's about 6 cases relate to domestic incidents or breach of barring orders. And there's about 24 cases relate to assault generally. About 5 were in respect of sexual assault and 1 pending. And in respect of any conviction, even before appeal is heard, I did instruct, and that has been followed through, because there was an inconsistency of application in terms of permission of the local leave mechanism. But they're all on local leave, and that's why I just, to make sure there was no doubt about that. But not all the 68 are in the category. I just have to make that point. But within the Defence Forces, in my view, as there is a special onus, just as I think in the Gardaí, and I don't mean that in any way to distinguish them, but basically in terms of those who are charged in society with protecting society, there are standards and so on that we do have to apply. Sorry.
Deputy Kern.
Okay.
Taoiseach, I can only presume from your reply that you didn't understand the question or the contribution that I made in the first instance, so I'm going to do my best to try and explain it again. We hear more about women being told not to walk home alone at night than we do about men being told not to assault or rape women who are walking home alone at night. So many women decide to take a taxi. The thought of the fact that the person driving that taxi could be a convicted sexual offender is the stuff of nightmares for women. I'm asking you about regulation in that sector through the NTA. I'm asking you about regulation for dentists. This is something the Social Democrats raised in our last PMB, and nothing has been done. I'm asking about regulation in the counselling sector, and you haven't touched on a single one of those things in your reply. I know that it's multifaceted. You say that it's an overall approach we take. The government is the only thing that can give power to those overarching bodies to be able to suspend people who have offences like that. That is what I'm asking you to look at. Can you please directly respond to that, and can you tell us also the number of people who have been suspended from the Defence Forces?
Thank you.
Look, Deputy, you have this tendency to, in a very self-righteous way, suggest, through the Chair, please.
Stop dodging.
In a very self-righteous way, to suggest that everybody else in the House has somehow an inferior approach to what is a very fundamental issue for all of us in this House. Okay? I just want to make the point. You raised... I'm sorry, I will deal with the question. You raised the Defence Forces, Deputy. I answered on the Defence Forces. You raised, in terms of, you said that it was all talk on this side of the House. I just made a response which I was entitled to make, that it's not all talk. And that everybody in the House, I would acknowledge everybody in the House, has a shared objective, and I outlined what the government was doing in response to your assertions that the government was doing nothing. I think that's a fair response. On regulation, on the Dental Council, dentists, any dentist convicted of sexual assault cannot continue in terms of dental practice. That is the case. Come on. I mean, I've seen in the past where there's been investigations, some horrific in terms of child abuse in the past in respect of dental practice. But again, in terms of regulation, yes, the regulator and taxi regulator should have a role, no question, in terms of any rogue taxi driver, particularly any taxi driver involved in sexual assault, should never drive a taxi again. But of course, any taxi driver committing assault should be inside, in my view, depending, I'm not going into individual case, should be in prison, obviously. Yes, and the regulation...
Time is up now.
There's been... Look, across this society, we have regulated extensively. We have regulated extensively. And in terms of medical counsel or in terms of the dental council, we will continue to see if we can enhance that.